By the end of the 2010s, the future sound of London's discography and general output was becoming incredibly complex and difficult to follow. Indeed, one of the most common comments I see online about this era of the FSOLDigital period of the band is that most people just couldn't really keep up. That's one of the reasons I started this series. However, for a few years at least, there was a certain reliability about things. And so, today, on Earthbeat Visions, a history of the future sound of London, we enter 2019 once again with a calendar album and a Ramblings EP. FSOLDigital presents 2019 calendar album. Release date 3rd January to 29th December 2019. Yes, it's back, but this time there is no actual calendar. However, as before, a FSOLDigital track is delivered each month to make a new 12-track album. The first track is ready and waiting for 2019, The Future Sound of London, DAC 5053 TMY. A nice surprise start to 2019 there. The printing company who had produced the previous 2 years' worth of calendars was owned by a friend of Brian's and had closed down, meaning that easy access to printing wasn't available, so it was decided to forego the calendar for this year. With no physical calendar appearing by the end of 2018, it was believed that the project had come to a close. This was particularly good news, in fact, as the 2019 calendar album is by far my favourite of the series, and one that I feel actually stands up to some of the band's core albums. There are a couple of reasons for this. The first is track selection, which is largely outstanding, featuring some of the band's finest pieces of the era. The second is the way the lack of crossfades on the original release was dealt with many tracks in the first half particularly beginning and ending abruptly, which went some way to making it feel like a single flowing entity. This does stop later in the record, but even so, those few capitalist moments were very much appreciated. Of course, as with the 2017, 18 and 20 calendar albums, the later Bandcamp release of the record found it all playing gapless with newly added environments. With 10 tracks by FSOL, it also feels slightly more focused than the first two editions, with only the ravey Smart Systems track sounding out of place. Feels like there's a real effort put into creating a stylistically and tonally consistent album here, and it really pays off. The Future Sound of London, DAC 5053 TMY. A lovely opening to the 2019 album, the oddly named piece features what is, by this point, the very familiar melancholic sound of synth pads with a strange drum beat that never really hits its stride, instead featuring sampled acoustic percussion that hits away almost at random. It's a very pretty track though, and quite evocative despite its brief sub 3 minute runtime. The Future Sound of London, Frozen Air, also known as Frozen Air Shortened Mix. Hello calendar subscribers, here is the second track in the 2019 calendar album, The Future Sound of London, Frozen Air Shortened Mix. Parts were taken from an old SideQuest drive from 1995, loaded back into the Akai samplers and rewritten with Atari C-Lab software. The result, Frozen Air. This is the shortened mix of a 15-minute composition. Enjoy. Well, there's an enhanced archive for you then, right back to the 90s way of working, only in 2019. One of 3 tracks I was adamant should appear on Music for Calendars, Frozen Air is a real stunner. Dark, brooding arpeggios and pads give a late 2010s sound, but the drums and overall dense composition are very much FSOL in 90s mode. It was immediately incredibly popular on the FSOL board, and the general consensus was, release the full 15-minute version. No such luck yet. It's unknown whether Frozen Air refers to Gaz Tune 6 or B Tune from the main 1995 disc. Future Sound of London, Artificial Placement of Emotion. The third of my must-haves for Music for Calendars, Artificial Placement of Emotion is one of my favourite FSOL tracks. Described as an archive track from 2017, it's a lively piece combining newer sounds, skittering IDM beats, synth harps, a fairly minimal arrangement, with that classic FSOL staple of wordless female-sounding vocals. A gorgeous, airy track reminiscent of soaring through clear skies. It likely came from sessions for an early scrapped version of Environment 7. The quality of it as a scrapped track certainly raised the bar of expectation for the finished album. A few later Calendar album tracks feature a very similar sounds, suggesting that this was just generally part of an aborted session. The track's embedded art appears as the 2019 Calendar album's artwork on the Bandcamp edition. The Future Sound of London, Petroleum. Hello Calendar subscribers, here's the fourth track in the 2019 Calendar album, The Future Sound of London, Petroleum. This is a track recorded by FSOL around 2008. 2008 places it around the Environments 3 sessions, although there's some dramatic overlap in recording dates with the Environments albums, which is quite surprising when you hear the track, as it certainly sounds like nothing from that album. Mind you, it doesn't massively sound like any other FSOL track. After a long opening environment, birdsong and synths, a live-sounding mid-tempo drum beat comes in, over which some fairly jaunty, squelchy synth melodies play. I think the flute sample is also used in Serengeti, although it could just be a similar one. FSOLDigital era tracks are rarely this bouncy and upbeat, making it a refreshing and unusual piece. The Future Sound of London, Cellular Glitch. Greetings FSOL Calendar subscribers. The May 2019 Calendar track release comes in the form of a variant version of 2010 Environment 3 classic A Glitch in Cellular Memory. This track was never released until now but has been dusted down and cleaned up. Let's just ignore that singular environment there for a moment and appreciate how fitting the original title is and how well it develops into this reworking, as this is basically the rhythmic elements of the original thrown into a glitch machine. It makes you wonder how many other Environment 6 style tracks like this were in the works while the band were releasing largely ambient, modern classical tinged music. Humanoid, Coon Tig. Hello FSOL Calendar subscribers. In celebration of the album released by Humanoid, June's Calendar track comes from the Humanoid recording sessions earlier this year. Humanoid, Coon Tig. Nicely timed Calendar track to tie in with Built by Humanoid, and more on that next week. Coon Tig is simplistic and minimal by that album's standards, which is by no way saying it's actually a basic track. Not so far off the current FSOL IDM sound, only with added burps and squeaks from the 303, it's a dark and energetic piece. Smart Systems, the new generation. This time around we go way back to 1991 in fact. This is a Smart Systems Abandoned Pulse EP track, grabbed from an archive of around 70 unreleased pre-1993 Dougans Cobain compositions. The black sheep of the 2019 calendar, the new generation is a full-on UK hardcore track complete with breakbeats, synth stabs and vocal wails. The title comes from the vocal sample, as more famously used in Central Industrial. With its high energy and dynamic changes, it's a solid example of the style and would have been a fine addition to whichever Pulse EP it was recorded for. Indeed, it eventually ended up on Pulse 5 a few years later. Surrounded by 21st century material on the 2019 album, however, it's just weird. Future Sound of London, Retracing. Apologies for pushing it right up to the wire, but this month's track comes from the vaults, the Future Sound of London Retracing. This track originates from sessions around 2014-15. Back to the melancholica, again with Retracing, released right at the very end of the month. Recorded in 2014 or 15 would make this a potential for a track recorded for the first scrapped version of Environment 6, although it actually sounds pretty much like a piece from the finished album, with layers of arpeggios and pads, boomy bass and skittering drum machine rhythms. It's a really great example of the sound, although the high-pitched note that plays through much of the track is a bit tough on the ears at times, or inaudible at all depending on your hearing and age. I'm cursed with ludicrously sensitive hearing, meaning even the tiniest sound cuts right through me. Future Sound of London, Parliament. Track 9 from the 2019 calendar series is now available. This month, Future Sound of London bring us the track Parliament. Let's not beat around the bush here. No matter what Gaz might want to suggest on Facebook, FSOL or not, and have never been a political band. So a track named Parliament, the famous Big Ben clock tower from London's Palace of Westminster, home to the House of Commons and House of Lords, embedded in the IT tag, seems like an odd choice of title and artwork. Is this a political statement? I can't remember exactly what was going on in summer 2019 other than lots of arguments about Brexit, but if this is a political track, the dark ambient piece certainly doesn't paint a particularly positive picture of our government, which is fair enough. Could also just be a name inspired by an old photo of Big Ben. A doom-laden drone track with various samples fed through cavernous reverbs is abstract, unwelcoming, incredibly impressive, and totally unlike any other FSOL track. Future Sound of London, The Shed. It was agreed a track should be made from the contents of the garden shed. Bikes, watering cans, shovels, wooden garden chairs were all used. Please enjoy The Shed by FSOL, this month's calendar track. I love the wording of these emails. It was agreed a track should be made from the contents of the garden shed is such a brilliant sentence. In an era of heavily synthetic FSOL, this is a real breath of fresh air made from a list of shed miscellanea listed before. Far from being a random sound experiment though, it's a fun, sprightly, and the use of FSOL patented cavernous reverb, surprisingly atmospheric piece. The most important question is, why does the garden shed have table and chairs set out on top of it? Future Sound of London, obscured by dark intervals. November is still here, so here's the 11th track in the calendar series. This month's calendar track was recorded August 2019 at 9L West Studios, produced by FSOL, engineered by Yage. Sent out on the evening of 30th November and cutting it pretty fine, indeed some parts of the world are already in December. Obscured by dark intervals is a slice of heavy, noisy electronica. No melody to speak of, just overdriven metallic rhythms, and what sounds like an entire shed's worth of metal gear being thrown around and fed through a distortion pedal. I always love it when they just put out a track that sounds totally unexpected and different, and this is such a great example of that. Loud and bonkers. It turned up later on Music for Calendars. The Future Sound of London, Musel. The final track of 2019, The Future Sound of London, Musel, recorded in 2018 at 9L West Studios, engineered by Yage. FSOL would like to thank you for your participation in the calendar album. See you in 2020. Don't forget to subscribe to next year's monthly tracks. Happy New Year to you all. After a run of pieces ranging from strange to heavy to epic to unexpected, jarring old pieces and brand new compositions, the 2019 calendar album comes to a close on one of its more subtle pieces, mirroring the album opener in mood, if not exactly in sound. The drums actually remind me of the band's 90s sound, which makes its 2018 recording taste surprising, although the synth pads and minimal arrangement here are more in keeping with the time. The Future Sound of London, Ramblings of a Madman Volume 3. Release date 6th of May 2019. A banner appeared online in February 2019 announcing the third Ramblings of a Madman zine, and a week later the zine itself was released, accompanied by the now usual 6-track download EP and optional one-of-a-kind art print and hoodie combo. You know the score by now. Vit and Accelerator on the front cover of the zine, 96 A6 pages of stories, images and press cuttings collaged together with logos and strange bits of text. Some highlights of this third volume include a photo of Gaz and Riz on Albert Square, an advert for the still forthcoming Halia synth, a flyover for a 1988 event featuring Live Acid by Stacker, a possible forthcoming track title viewed from Configuration, art for a single of In Solitude We Are Least Alone with Source of Uncertainty as B-side. What the hell is this? Unseed Earthbeat photographs and amorphous material in a zine for the first time. The 14 stories this time are Top of the Flops, the band go on Top of the Pops to perform Papua New Guinea, and predictably things don't go to plan. Vit from the old official site, Vit is less than impressed with the Far Out Son of Lung cover. Liz forms a lengthy and very revealing tale about the recording of the Lifeforms single. Headstone Lane from the 2001 official store, a description of the Headstone Lane album. Stacker Humanoid, Gaz fondly remembers the Humanoid era as seen on the 90s official site. The Day the Electricity Died, a long story originally posted on Gaz's Facebook about time spent during an unexpected power cut. ISDN, the EBV site story about the limited edition album. There now follows a party political broadcast, 2001 official store entry describing each track from Papua New Guinea translations. Papua New Guinea, EBV site story about the band's most famous track. The most expensive restaurant in town, Gaz at his daftest with a story about the band's diet during the making of Lifeforms VHS. Includes the revelation that Brian's main culinary contribution at the time was tuna bake with crisps. Explosive from the 2001 official store on how We Have Explosive killed off FSOL in the late 90s. Room 208, a bizarre, probably fictional story from the EBV site which seems to end with Brian and Gaz about to engage in a threesome with a stranger. The Oldest Trick in the Rock and Roll Book, another 90s story about how the band was screwed over by the Orb in New York. Accelerator, the old official site description of the band's debut album. This time the EP comes with its own embedded artwork labelled Book 3 Music. The 6 tracks are largely as expected, in line with the previous volumes and mostly very current, with the IDM and textural ambient sounds of the late 2010s releases all present. The only outlier is Take Umbrage, the only Ramblings EP track to clearly have some archive elements. Although 10 books in the series were promised, this third is the last to be released at this point in time. There are still stories remaining from the past, Earthbeat and Child of the Bass Generation from the official site, the Stacker Sessions and Z-Box from the 2001 store, the first 3 chapters of Gaz's 2001 Ramblings of a Madman mini-site, a track-by-track of Alice in Ultraland, plus numerous Facebook tales, and no doubt many, many more to be told. Whether the remaining 7 volumes will come along and when remains to be seen. It's now been 6.5 years, so I wouldn't hold your breath. Turbulent Haze. The third Ramblings of a Madman EP opens with the intense Turbulent Haze. It's heavily rooted in the late 2010s IDM sound, although faster than just about anything else from the era, with watery sounding, low bitrate synth pads that add an unexpected texture to the piece. Restricted conversation between occupants. Something about this track title is very unsettling to me. Why is the conversation restricted? Who's restricting it? Where are the occupants living? It's actually a fairly welcoming sounding track despite the name, with warm layers of synths, crackling textures, field recordings and background samples. Other than the occasional violin and flute note, nothing really takes the foreground, allowing the piece to swell as a slice of ambient atmospherics. A wonderful example of this era's textural ambient sound. Take umbrage. The piece with the only recognisably archived sounds from the 3 Ramblings EPs, Take Umbrage has roots in Lifeform's era with synth pads from Ill Flower and drums from Kai, itself originally a 1993 track, forming the basis of this chugging breaks track. The bass is synthetic and reverb heavy, reminiscent of the Environment 6 era, suggesting it may well be an enhanced archived piece, updated in recent years, or a new track pieced together including earlier snippets of unfinished tracks. Outsourced. More recent sounds of this piece for weirdly paced glitchy beats, synth arpeggios and fuzzy pads. The now familiar dark minor key nature is present. Viewed from the pedestrian's angle. With all 3 Ramblings EPs containing a Views track, the Music for 3 Books album ends up with an unusual record with 3 of them on the same album. Anyway, viewed from the pedestrian's angle is very minimal on the piano front, with a single chord played repeatedly throughout. It appears to be played by Brian with no Dan Pemberton credit listed on the digital or CD editions. Other than a very brief piano melody, the rest of the piece is taken up by dense background atmosphere with the now familiar Views crackling textures. Disseminate. After a run of largely very beautiful and atmospheric pieces ending a lot of recent albums, the 3rd Ramblings EP, and consequently Music for 3 Books, reverts to type with a classic 90s album closer that doesn't really feel like an album closer. Layers of drum loops and a bass guitar line are fed through oscillating filters, with guitar notes occasionally playing over the top. It's a decent percussive track with a fine groove, but a bizarre choice to close things. Humanoid and Yage, MOA 016. Madman 7, and that's probably wrongly pronounced, was an Icelandic label that started mostly releasing 7-inch lathe cuts in eye-wateringly limited edition runs. It was run by a photographer, rest in peace, who was a regular artist on Touch Music, which is no doubt how the link with FSOL appeared. One of the earliest releases on the label, MOA 016, the 16th release, unsurprisingly, featured 2 remixes. Both of them had originally appeared on past Touch Music releases. B12's Orbiter 12, rebuilt by Humanoid, and Funkarma's Emplixian Ambient Yage remix. With only 30 copies manufactured, it's arguably the rarest FSOL physical release in existence. The 2 tracks also went on to be released on the labels MOA CD1 and CD2 compilations. And that's your lot for this week. I hope you enjoyed the video. I hope you enjoyed the music. I'd like to hear your thoughts on both of them. Leave me a comment down below. There's buttons for sharing and promoting me. Do press away. And I will be back very soon, looking next week. Not, as mentioned earlier, on Built by Humanoid, and I could go back and re-record that, but I can't be asked. But instead following the previous year's pattern with a new re-recording album, Yage 2019, so I hope you'll join me then.